Hello everyone and welcome to my very late February wrap-up and March TBR video. At this point, halfway into March already almost, I'm not even going to attempt trying to justify why this video hasn't got to you sooner. I will just go and talk about the books. In February, I was able to read 6 books, most of which I really liked, so I had a really good reading month. During February, I also took part in the Continent read-along that is organized by Jasmine at the book Jazz, and I've been mentioning it in my past videos and I'll leave the information again down below. The February continent for the read-along was Africa, so I read a few books from there. The first one that I read was Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a coming-of-age story of a 15-year-old girl in Nigeria who has a very strict religious father. It is a very nicely written book. I really liked how it was written. I have a full review for the book, so I won't talk too much about it. I will just link the review down below. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. The next book that I read in February was my Stephen King book of the month. That book was The Dead Zone by Stephen King. I read a Romanian copy of it, which is this. I've had this since I was like 14. And I really enjoyed this book. Again, I have a review for the book that I made and I'll be linking that as well down below if you want to hear more details about it. On Goodreads, I gave the book 5 out of 5 stars and it made me really excited to continue reading Stephen King throughout the whole year. Next up, I went back to the Continent's read-along and I picked up Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee. This book is set in post-apartheid South Africa and it follows a literature professor, I think, who upon being involved in a scandal in his university is suspended, and he goes to live with his daughter who owns a farm in rural South Africa. The things he sees there are very different than the things he was used to while living in the city. The book is quite short, and if I say too much about it, it's going to just spoil a lot of the event, so I'm not going to say too much, but I can tell you that this book was one of the most frustrating and enraging books I have ever read. I wanted to throw it across the room. I wanted to just punch the characters for their decisions. It made me feel so upset. Having said that though, I did think the book was very good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I think it was a very good book. It was a very important book, but it's definitely not a book that you want to read to get enjoyment out of. It's not a book that you want to read for the feel-good factor. Next up, I finished a book that I had started in January, and that was a short story collection by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Incredible and sad tale of innocent Erendira and her heartless grandmother, and other short stories. This collection of short stories was published in 1972, and it contains 12 stories. I read a Romanian translation, and I'm not sure why, but this only has 7 stories. It's a lot shorter. There is a lot of magical realism in it. I enjoyed Marquez's writing style, but I can't say I was completely in love with his stories. There were some stories that I liked more than others. I liked the tale of Erendira. My favorite of all of them was the very old man with enormous wings. Apart from that one, all the other stories to me were kind of average. I didn't really like them so much. They were very short. They felt very incomplete. After I read them and I read a little bit about the short story collection, I realized that it is advised to read this after you read 100 Years of Solitude, because there are recurring characters and these stories are more of a continuation of the fate of the characters than his novels. I hadn't read anything by Garcia Marquez before, so I think that's where I might have done this wrong. I should have read one of his novels first. Overall, the stories didn't really impress me. The stories averaged from about 2 stars to 4 stars, so the whole 7 of them averaged to 3 stars on Goodreads. Next up, I read a Romanian book which I absolutely adored. It was hilarious in a very depressing way. A lot of Romanian humor has to do with making fun of how bad and cruel the reality is, and this book was absolutely brilliant. In Romanian, the title of the book is Sunt o babă comunistă by Dan Lungu. This translates to I am a communist old hag. This book has been translated into German, French, Turkish, Spanish, and many other languages, but apparently it has not been translated into English which sucks because this is a really good book. This is about a woman who lived during communism. She lived a good life during communism. She was amongst the people that were more privileged during communism. So the book is about a woman who is nostalgic for the communism regime. She receives a phone call from her daughter who lives in Canada right before the elections in Romania, and her daughter tells her not to vote with the former Communist Party. And she is very surprised by that, and she thinks, why wouldn't she vote for the Communist Party? Because she wants the communists to come back. She had such a good life during communism. So that sparks a whole train of thought, and she goes back in time, remembering her life there, and at the same time living her life in the present. So there are two parallel planes that the action takes place in. I loved his writing style. I laughed out loud. It was painful to read outside of the house. I started laughing out loud on the bus. The book is very sarcastic. I really love the humor, and despite being humorous, it's very, very depressing. In the end, on Goodreads, I gave 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm so looking forward to reading more written by this author. The last book that I read in February, which was actually started in February and finished in early March, was First They Killed My Father, A Daughter of Cambodia Remembers by Lung Ung. This is a memoir written by a woman who was 5 when the Khmer Rouge took over in Cambodia. The book is set between 1975 and 1979 when Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia and killed over 2 million Cambodians, either by just massacring them or by starvation. This was a very difficult book to read. It was very heartbreaking, especially since it was not fiction. It was a true story, and those are always the hardest to read. I have learned in school about the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot and the killing fields and a little history of Cambodia, but I never really read anything so in detail about it, and I had no idea that Pol Pot's regime there had been so ruthless. Lung Ung's family was a privileged family who was living in Phnom Penh at the time when the Khmer Rouge took over. Her father was working in the police. Her mother was an aristocrat of Chinese descent, and they had, I believe, 7 children, including the author of the book. And when the Khmer Rouge take over, they are forced to leave everything behind, to leave their home and work really hard in the fields. They were forced to hide and lie about their identity, because had they been discovered that their father was working for the former government, they would have been instantly shot. The fact that their mother was of Chinese descent was also something that was a huge disadvantage for them, because part of the killings in Cambodia at the time had to do with ethnic cleansing. It was a very difficult book to read. It was very heartbreaking, and sort of a funny story. The fact that this book is called First They Killed My Father should give away the fact that they kill her father. Not that it's a spoiler, but I was so grasped by the book, and I was rooting for the characters so much. I was hoping so much that they were going to be fine and nothing happened to either of them, that I was completely shocked when they killed her father. And then I looked at the title and I felt like a complete idiot, because I should have known they killed her father. I knew they killed her father from the moment I picked up the book, but I had been so grasped by the story that I completely forgot. I think this is a very important book. It's written in a very accessible style. This is one of those examples where history is told so much better through the eyes of those who lived through it, rather than just history textbooks. This is the first book in a trilogy of memoirs. There are 2 more books in this series of A Daughter of Cambodia Remembers, talking about the events after this book and in her life after 1979, when the Khmer Rouge lost control of Cambodia. So I'm really looking forward to getting those books in the future as well. In the end, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and in case you're wondering, yes, I did read the Romanian translation of it, which looks almost exactly like the English cover. So this was it for all I read in February. I had a really good reading month, even though most of what I read was very depressing and gloomy and made me feel very upset. So now let's go into a very quick March TBR video, considering that it is already almost halfway into March and I have really not been reading too much. I will not be very ambitious. The first book that I'm going to mention is a book that I am currently reading. I am about halfway in, and it is a Romanian book. It's called Pânza de Păianjen by Cela Sârghi. This translates into The Spider Web. It is an old book. It's falling apart. Look, it's a book that was published in the 70s. It is falling apart. I love this. It was a book that my mom read, my aunts read, my grandparents read. It's the same edition. I love reading these books. This book is about the life of a woman, just her life and love story, and it is really interesting. It's really beautiful, and again, I don't think it was translated into English. So many Romanian books are very good, but they're not translated into English, and that is very frustrating. The next book that I want to read in March is my Stephen King book of the month. Chronologically, that is Christine. This book is about a possessed car, I believe. This isn't one of his most famous books. It's not one of his best rated books, but it's Stephen King, so I'm sure that I will enjoy it. The other book that I'm going to try to read in March, this is The Lost Word by Oya Baydar. This is a Turkish book, and I have a Romanian copy of it here. I believe that the main theme of this book is the Turkish versus Kurdish conflict in Turkey. This is a recent book. I believe it was published somewhere in 2000s. And I'm really looking forward to reading it finally, because I've been meaning to read it since January. These are all my books on my TBR for March. So this was it for my February wrap-up and March TBRs. Thank you so much for watching. If you know anything about any of these books or have any opinions to share with me, please do so in the comments. And I will see you back with more videos soon. Have a great day. Bye!